our Breakthrough Success Community project in core, that's actually a two-way street. It's around strategically building relationships between school adults and students. That's how that kind of thing happens. So we're really excited to be able to share a little bit with you today and even do an activity that will have us act as if we are a school-based team working with a group of students and being able to investigate some of the things that they're telling us. I'm Dave Calhoun, I'm the Executive Director of the Data Collaborative Core, and my colleague today is Juli Coleman.
Hi all, and I am the Chief of Improvement for School Networks, and I work with the 9th grade on track community that we call Breakthrough Success Community.
Our project really is, like Juli just mentioned, a 9th grade on track project, on track for post-secondary success. So we're actually looking at 9th grade students, what they've been able to accomplish so far up through their elementary and middle school years, and then that critical year, that make or break year, the 9th grade year, first year of high school, and how can we help to support improving their trajectories for being on track for post-secondary success. And so we want to try to hit three big things today. We want to tell you a little bit about the BTSC, as we call it, and why we use the developmental relationships framework. So we talked about that relationship between students and school adults. Works out of a framework that we call the developmental relationship framework. And then talk a little bit about how do we measure relationships and what does that actually look like. That's where we'll have a chance to do a little bit of an activity and act as if we're a school team together working on that. And then finally, to talk a little bit about what does that actually look like on the ground in some of the schools that we're working with. So, what's an example of how a school uses this information? We really think, and as we get into our activity today, that the opportunity for you to look at both the slides that we have and a spreadsheet that's actually got student responses on it will be really valuable for you. So if you've got your laptop, I see a lot of cameras going up, scan that QR code. If you don't have either, then we've got a few printed copies. Won't be as good of an experience, but we can still make it work. And we'll probably at that point just kind of blow up the room too and have everybody get into like groups of 4. And you can do this routine pretending like you're working at a school table. Okay, so kind of fundamental to all of this is the notion that every system is perfectly designed to get exactly the results that it gets. And I want to turn it over to Juli to talk a little bit about what that means, how it fits into our context.
Great. So the Breakthrough Success Community is founded on this belief. We believe fundamentally systems are designed and they get exactly what they're designed to get. And so I'm gonna make an argument that's been made multiple times today, but I'm gonna go ahead and make it anyway. This is a graph from Sean Reardon's research out of Stanford. So let me explain what you're looking at. What is being displayed are average student test scores in a district. So if a district had 100 students or more of a racial group, that's the bubble. So pink is white students, blue is Latinx, and green is black. And the bigger the bubble, the more students there are. So that's the what. The why is the average performance of the students. So average is right here. Anything above means above grade level. Anything below is below grade level. And then the X is the parent socioeconomic status. So the, parents who are poorer are on the left. Parents who have more resources or are richer are on the right. What do you notice about what is clumped in the far right top bubble?
Disproportionately white students of upper economic status.
Yes, our white students are performing higher than any other student group, even keeping into account parent socioeconomic status. And what Sean Reardon's argument is there is not a district in the United States that is breaking this pattern. And so when we think about the system is perfectly designed to produce the results it gets, this is what it's designed to produce. And I don't know, you all have probably seen the Thomas Jefferson slide that talks about the founding of our school system was to sort and classify students, and it's doing it beautifully. Sadly.
Yes.
And so, the point of our community is we believe that if we want a different result, we need to produce a different system. So what you will see here is we want to transform the ninth grade experience. We want ninth grade to look different. And we're a breakthrough success community, so we want breakthrough improvement on our outcome measures. We really encourage schools to set 20 percentage point differences from one year over the other. And the reason why we suggest that is we say our aim should be electrifying, not electrocuting. And the reason why we encourage schools to do that is if you're going to change something by 20 percentage points in 1 year, you can't tinker with the system. You have to do something fundamentally different. And the 5 areas that we work in, we call these our 5 drivers, is we've reworded this one, is now adult teaming. So it's how do adults on campus come together to talk about students in asset-based ways to support their success in ninth grade. Supportive ninth grade transition scheduling, how kids are scheduled in classes and how teachers are scheduled in the schedule. Grading practices, and today what we're going to talk about is our strong student-adult relationships. Each of these drivers have measures. Today we're really going to hone in on what do we mean on adult relationships. And so what we pull from is the Search Institute. Are folks familiar with the Search Institute? So what they say is kids need a web of relationships. They need adults in their lives that do different things for them. Generally speaking, teachers see their role as express care, show me that I matter to you, and provide support, help me complete goals. But what they're arguing is that's not enough. Kids need adults across, in their community, in their school, in their lives, that do all of these things for them. And what we say is we want a net. We want a net under students that provides a supportive environment for them so that they have those adults that are doing those things like challenge growth, expand possibilities, share power, not just express care, provide support, which are important but insufficient. But what we also, so before we go into that, let's do a quick think, pair, share. Dave and I can't present without you all talking to each other. So think about a developmental relationship that you had in your own life growing up. Think back to when you were in 9th grade or 10th or 11th. Who was it? How did that person provide your nourishment, support, and stability? Who was it and what did they do for you? Welcome back. Now there's lots of adults in our lives when we were young people. How many folks named somebody from their school that was that adult? For many students, that is the transformative experience that they have. And we think of adult relationships as roots. It's the foundation that provides that nourishment, support, and stability. But what we also know is that 1 out of 5 students can't name an adult. They don't have developmental relationships. And so their net is broken. And that's the challenge that we're trying to solve, is how do we build, again, if we're going to do this work, we want to build a system that reliably supports students. And so one way that we set out to do that is we use a lot of improvement science in our work, so we need to measure. We need to understand what is currently happening in our schools. So our students take developmental relationships survey 3 times a year. So it's identifiable by student. One thing we forgot to say a little bit about is our community. There are 35 high schools that participate in the Breakthrough Success community across 9 districts. Many of them, some of the largest urban districts in California, like LA Unified, Oakland, Santa Ana, San Diego Unified. That gives you a flavor of who we work with. And in our winter survey, so that was given in January, and we'll say we put in this little tip prior to any Oscars.
You're forgiven.
Full disclosure. We had 8,991 students report on one single administration of a survey.
Wow.
We give it 3 times a year. The data team is currently calculating our survey results from this last administration. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave, who's going to talk a little bit about what is the survey, what are the reports schools get, and give you a chance to play with some of the data.
I just want to highlight for a second something Julie just mentioned. She said it's identifiable by student. So this is not your parents' Oldsmobile. This is not a typical survey, anonymous, given once a year, trends over time kind of thing. We think of this as like an opportunity for students to express their experience to the school staff. And so the kids know, by and large, I think probably across all of our schools, that they are in a dialogue via this survey with the school staff, with their teachers. And they have an opportunity to share. So the survey itself is a bit of a change instrument, if you will, not simply a research tool to kind of collect trends over time. So I think that's really fundamentally important. So we want to get into a few of the data views that our school teams use when they get the survey results back. And I'm going to start here at the 30,000 foot level with the graph that's over on the right. It's basically an ordered bar graph or an ordered bar chart of students, percentage of students with strong developmental relationship responses. Those are in the blue. So you can sort of see the schools with the highest percentage, with moderate results or moderate responses in the green, or with weak developmental relationships shown over there with the orange. So we don't see a whole lot of orange, but there are a significant number of kids at these schools that are saying that, I got nothing here. And a lot of them are moderate as well, and so we would love to see 100% strong relationships in the blue, but we don't see that. Over on the left-hand side, oh, by the way, the school that, the data that we're going to look at for the rest of our time here today, I'm just going to call School A, and I'm just noting this is where School A stands in the ordered bar chart, the sequence of districts or schools that are here. On the left-hand side, we're kind of tracking the fall administration results to the winter administration results. And we'll do this again at the end of the year to add the spring results in too. And so each school has a percentage of students reporting strong relationships in the fall, and then what was the percent showing strong relationships in the winter. And on the same graph, the percent that expressed weak relationships in the fall, and then weak relationships in the winter. So some interesting visual patterns that you can see here as you look at this. If we look at School X, for example, at the top, that I was just pointing at, 44% strong relationships at the beginning in the fall, down to 35% in the winter. And weak relationships went up from 5% to 17%. Almost like a little greater than sign, if you will. Thinking about your mathematics stuff, that's kind of not the direction we'd like to see things go. Relationships kind of generally trending down in strength, and more kids showing weak. Actually, as we talked with the Search Institute for these responses, we've got guidance from them recognizing that that's generally the case across all the places that they've been giving this survey, is that the developmental relationship responses tend to go down as the year progresses. That's not something we want. Our aim is for them to go up, or at the very least to maintain them. And I would say that our results generally corroborate that as the year goes on, our results are going down too. But knowing that that's kind of the pattern for how things work, it kind of moves us more toward, okay, how can we interrupt this and how can we make some changes here? So you see some different patterns as you look at schools. Here's an interesting one, school Z. It's like a little less than sign. What's that saying? How would you interpret that?
That's kind of the perfect direction, right? Good is getting better and bad is getting worse.
That's what we love to see. Strong relationships going up, weak relationships going down. Of course, because we're not plotting the moderate relationships here, it's not a one-to-one correspondence between the strong and the weak. At our school, School A, what are they showing? Not much change, a couple percent down for strong, a couple percent down for weak, so we got a little bit better with our weakest responders from the fall, but we also lost some of our strong relationships in School A. Some of the other displays that we look at, Julie mentioned a little bit the 5 different topic areas that are important: expressing care, challenging growth, providing support, sharing power, and expanding possibilities. And we can look at those, the group of items that comprise each of those topics and the percentage of students. And this is our School A that's here. 28% overall strong in the winter, 48% moderate, sorry for sake of the screen, and 24% expressing weak. And so we can disaggregate. The teacher teams, the school teams can look at this and kind of see, is there a topic area where there's some variation that we might want to address or think about? We also are very interested in following our mission to be equity focused. What does this look like for our students that are traditionally underrepresented and underserved? And so you have the ability with our little Tableau workbook to identify a student group of interest, highlighted in yellow, and compare the percentage of strong relationships to moderate to weak as you look at each of these. With the little cross tabs down here that identifies the particular students. So being able to recognize, is it the same for our Latinx kids? Is it the same for our Black kids? Is it the same across socioeconomic status, English learner status? Many of those things they can take a look at. And then we also do some reporting across time. So you saw there was a winter set of results and back to a fall set of results. But even for School A, they can get a little bit more of a breakdown here, and they can look at the percentage of the counts of students that go into each one of these and really get a clear picture just for my school. What is that distribution? What does the change look like? We're also interested in asking the question, if there's been some change, some kids are moving between, moderate relationships to strong, or strong relationships to weak, or what are they? So we create a crosstabs basically here that identifies from the fall administration what was the category that students identified themselves to be in, and then from the winter administration in the columns, what are the counts of kids that are in those categories. So for our School A, we can see the number of kids in each one of these areas with, like we mentioned, it's a by student survey, so we can actually see each student and what were their answers and their responses there. Our school teams work with this a little bit, and we recognize that sometimes a crosstabs is a little bit difficult thing for them to capture and understand and make sure that they can work with. And so we do a little bit of support with that. So just being able to basically identify, if we were to pick a cell here, the number here is 17, what does that actually mean? And so just with a few visuals, being able to say, well, from the student, of all the students whose responses indicated moderate relationships strength in the fall, 17 students indicated strong relationships now. So just kind of working from a sentence frame to try to understand how that works. Very helpful for our school teams. They can anchor to the sentence frame and then work with that. And so this sentence frame is a part of what we provide, and we make sure they have a chance to practice it and think through, okay, what is this statement and what does it actually mean? You plug in the cell and you figure out what it's actually saying based on the sentence frame that we have. So those are some of the displays that we have for the selected response questions. We have, I think, 20 questions that are selected response questions. But we also ask, and these are not from the Search Institute, we ask 3 questions that are free response questions. They vary a little bit from administration to administration, but this is really a chance for us to really put to practice the notion that we want this to be a conversation between students and adults. Express to us what your answers are here, what you're feeling, and we want to get specific. Please name an adult at this school you can go to for support, help, or guidance. What does this person do that makes you know that you can go to them? And then finally, what are 1 to 2 things that your teachers have done to help you try even harder in this class? So just the free response opportunity really opens up the dialogue. And our school teams, as we got down, we started at the 30,000 foot level with the ordered bar charts, looking at all the schools, and now we're down to like, what are individual kids saying about things? So we create a formatted spreadsheet so they can look at all the students at their school by name and what are the responses that they gave to each of these 3 questions that are here. So we actually, taking a look at the displays and getting the framework, we want you all to turn yourselves into a school team right now. We're going to ask you, I went over very quickly a few of the results, but we're going to ask you to go back to those slides and take a look at some of the school level results for School A. And we also have an opportunity here to have you get into an anonymized version of that formatted spreadsheet to actually see the kids' free response answers to the questions that are here. So for the next few minutes, if you will, let's take about 5. Put yourselves in groups of 3 or 4, doesn't matter which. Take about 5, get back into the slide deck if you haven't, and review and discuss the summary visuals from the slides, and respond to the question, how's the school doing at nurturing strong relationships between school, adults, and students? And then about 5 minutes in, we'll call it out and ask you to go to the student spreadsheet then, and take a look at what is it that kids are saying. And again, consider maybe which students are saying that they have no one to go to at their school. What change idea might you try to increase the strength of relationships for these students? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, Julie.
Calls. We have community calls where we ask different folks to share out, and it's called a 2x10. Has anybody ever heard of a 2x10? So he's really excited about the 2x10. And comes back and says, I think we ought to try the 2x10 with the students who can't name an adult. Like on their survey, they couldn't name an adult, and they're in my class. And so they were like, let's have everyone do that. And Gina was like, hey, hold up. Let's have you 2 try it first, see how it goes, and then you write the playbook. We're using improvement cycles, so we want them to run a cycle to learn how it works. And Shane says, this girl always with the start smaller. And so how did the relationship start? And this is not scientific. This is 2 teachers just saying, this is what I think my relationship is with the student. Alam was a 1 with the student that he selected. And he's like, I'm going to try the 2x10. He's all, but I'm really nervous. She straight up does not like me. I have tried with her this year, but I'll try this. And Shane was a 2. He was like, I don't really have a relationship, but I'm going to give this a try. And what a 2x10 is 2 minutes for 10 days. That's where the word 2x10 comes from. And it is a teacher talking to a student, and this is the kicker, it cannot be academic or behavior talk. It's just like, hey, how you doing? And every day we do ask the teacher reflects daily. That doesn't always happen, but that is part of the 2x10 about what they learned about the student and what they learned about themselves. And I would say that second part is probably the more important part. And so here's how it went for Shane and Alem. Alem is in the green, Shane is in orange. So I'm just going to go through this. So we're 4 days in and it's not going great. But they keep on it. And about day, what is that, about day 6, it turned. And on those Thursdays, they had a block day. And so they completed the 2 by 2. Oh, you know what, it got cut off, and I was gonna make something up, but then I thought that's not real. So he had a very similar, Shane had a very similar reaction, and I'm gonna, there's quotes from them in a minute. So where did the relationship end? Alem is now at a 4 with the student, and Shane is a 4.5. So they're recognizing that there's still work to do. And Alem's reflection, and I will say Alem is an incredible teacher, but he had this to say. I was so wrong about her. I didn't even realize I had these assumptions about her. He was telling all these stories in his head about why the student wasn't having why he couldn't connect, and all of those assumptions got blown up 2 minutes over, and they didn't even do a full 10 days. And he also said, this makes you go beyond the usual things you have ever talked about. You actually form a real relationship. And what Shane said is, I realize there's the relationship you think you have with the student, and then there's the actual relationship you have. And so this is a great example of, it's a practice that really our educators who have tried it said it's transformative in their mindsets about beliefs that they hold about students, and it's transformative by the teachers. In fact, Alem just shared at our last learning session, and we had a teacher in another school try it, and the coach said, I went to the school, the teacher was worried about trying it, ended up trying it, kind of the same pattern, it didn't go well at first. And when he showed up for the meeting, the student was walking the teacher to the meeting because they still had so much to say. So our biggest takeaways is when you look at the data and what students are saying, they actually have very few meaningful interactions with adults. And what they want from us is pretty low bar. It's actually kind of sad. They will say things like, say hi to me. Help me when I need help. And when you sit with educators in a room and they hear those words from students, they are much more compelled to action.
And if I may co-sign, there was a similar story at my school this year. A student was marked as a chronic absenteeism student, and she wouldn't come for months on end. When we finally got a hold of her and we got her to sit down and talk, she expressed that one of her biggest issues was that teachers were not reaching out to her. She just wanted teachers to at least say her name, and they wouldn't even do that much. So she said that contributed to her being disengaged from school.
Yeah. And I will say one thing is when teachers hear that from students, it really transforms what they think and really compels them to action. I had, in one breakout, we used to do this via Zoom when we would hold these meetings. When the teacher got the spreadsheet, we at that point had to find students for them on, there was some technical issues, and she was pretty sure the student was going to name her as the adult. It gets a little competitive. They're like, I'm going to be the adult that gets named. Just all that. The student said, I don't need it. I can't name anybody. And in her, what can you do? She said, please stop calling home. It's not safe for me when you do that. And it totally changed what the teacher then how the teacher interacted with that student. So this particular relationship survey is equal parts changing relationship with students and changing adult mindsets about their beliefs about students. And Alem now has this saying, so I'm borrowing it from him, Alem and Shane. The size of the relationship is the amount you can push academically. And the student that he was talking about, when the relationship was like this, he couldn't push much. But when the relationship grew, his ability to push that student academically grew. And then the other last thing we kind of said this is that teachers, it really pushes teachers to examine what they think they know about student, and the data is very motivating. It gets them to try things, which is ultimately how we want to position the data, is how does this propel you to try something new? Do you have anything you want to add on?
Well, I'll just say, go back to the beginning, we talked about the survey as a change idea, as one of our drivers, not a once-a-year annual anonymized survey to look at trends. Who looks at those on a school site? This is transforming the conversation.
So let's open it up to some questions. Do any of you have questions? We'll go there and then hop over there.
First, thanks for sharing. This is kind of blowing my mind. Pragmatically, what does this look like for schools in terms of like the logistics of time it takes to administer, kind of who owns it within the school building, things like that?
Definitely sounds like a you question.
Yeah, it's probably a 10 to 12 minute administration. For most kids, there will be a few kids that want to write a novel, and that's great too. You always need to manage that. We offer some different options as far as how it gets administered. We actually have, probably the majority of our schools, we set up a school district-based Google form, and they do that, and we just grab that spreadsheet and process the data. We have a couple that do more sophisticated platforms and do it that way. It's typically the relationships champion at the school. So Abram, in this case, that actually communicated out, okay, we're going to give it in the English classes or the math classes, or these 4 teachers are going to be giving it. And so it's very like locally figured out what's the best way to get the survey out.
The other thing we've had schools do is create videos that tell about the surveys that get shown in every classroom. Last year, all kids took it on Zoom. And so they had like a little video production, like, hey, this is what it is. And then the second thing I was going to add is our data team has a response tracker, so the schools can see what students have and have not taken the survey. Especially like a school that's trying to change idea like 2x10s, they're really going to want to get those student responses so they know who to target. Let's go here, here, and then there.
I love this so much. It's amazing. And I have 2 questions. One is, where are the places where teachers do those 2x10 conversations? Because I can imagine in some schools and some schedules, it might be hard to find that spot. And then my second question is, how much do you see correlation between schools that have very large student loads per teacher versus schools where there's some sort of cohorting mechanism to reduce the student load?
I'll take the 2x10. So the 2x10, that's actually where a lot of the PDSAs get run. I think Alem chose a student that backed up to his prep, so he walked the student to the next class, or they will pick a student like at lunch. Our schools have figured out different ways to do that. That's kind of part of the improvement cycle to get it to happen. Generally speaking, the other thing they'll do is just hold the student like 2 minutes. They still have 3 minutes to get a class, and they'll tell the next period teacher, hey, I'm doing this idea. And the 9th grade team knows a little bit about what's going on, so they know, oh, if the student comes late, that's why.
That makes sense.
Just second piece, I'll just say that's really a spread and scale question. It's like, how do we get this going? First of all, we need evidence that it works. And so the stories of the students and the teachers and their experiences is a huge part of that. everybody to institute 2x10 across all the teachers, and, you know, we're gonna get 2 teachers saying, yeah, this, and, you know, the rest of the 98% going, oh, and here's another thing I'm gonna try, and it's not gonna work. You know, they're not changing their mindset. So we're gonna need to snowball this. That's how spread and scale.
I will say, I often think of people at the LEM as are like Instagram influencers. He's pretty compelling when you hear him talk. So there's other people trying 2x10, but he's probably our most compelling spokesperson. So as a network leader, I'm thinking about who's my Instagram influencers that are gonna convince me to buy something I don't need. But in his case, he's selling something that works, so.
We are at time, so let's go just very quickly.
Sorry, this is more of like a how your model works question. So after they give the survey, then Gina belongs to you guys, is that correct?
Yes,
So you
belongs
have
to us.
someone that like is coaching them throughout the year? Like who are they meeting with? How often? How does that work?
So Gina meets with them weekly, if they will, well, I will say, particularly Gina, if they would meet with her daily, she would be there daily. But she's meeting with somebody at least weekly, and she's the one, I would say, the PDSA cycles that they're running, Gina's kind of holding that a little bit more than necessarily the team writing those all out. But she would say things like this girl with the start small, that would be a typical, okay, it's a great idea, let's not go to implementation. Can you two try it? What evidence will we have that it works? How will we share that evidence? Those are all things that Gina is thinking about and building the team lead at the same time in those conversations.
Just really quickly, first, thanks for inspiring and really thoughtful presentation and engaging us as well. So kudos to you all. Quick question, just as an outside, have you done this all with non-school personnel in terms of measuring whether students have relationships with adults outside of the school?
So Search has something like that, where you can do a pulse check. I think they call it their pulse check on adults outside of the school. And I will say we went back and forth with that. And what we decided for our network is we have a severe, influence on the teachers. We're meeting with them. So we want as much information that's going to hold them to action, but Search does have that.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, that's what.